I just killed a spider. Just a baby one. Okay, it's time for chill chats. Haha. Welcome back to my room. I'm going to be talking about the differences between America and Australia. Well, I'm going to be talking about the differences that I think are really surprising, because I know there's a lot of videos like this out there, but I actually had like a special request from one of my friends and they wanted to kind of know my side of the story. I actually lived in America twice for a few months at a time, because the first time I went to America, I went for a college study abroad type thing. So in Australia we call it exchange, in America they call it study abroad. Oh my gosh, first difference. Yeah, I went for about 4 or 5 months and I met a lot of good friends there, and then I came back and I finished university, and then the second time I went was after my studies, just for like a kind of trip, and I went for another 3 months, which is the maximum that you can go on a tourist visa. But yeah, I really loved my time there, and honestly it felt like home while I was there. For further context, I currently live in Sydney in Australia, and that's where I'm basing all my differences off. And also when I was over in America, I lived in Los Angeles, or Greater Los Angeles. So a lot of the differences are those two towns specifically. So I wouldn't say that like this is generalized to the whole of America or generalized to the whole of Australia. Let's get started. People in general were more open to make new friends in LA than here in Sydney. I feel like here in Sydney we are always on the go, always on a mission, getting something done. And unless you know somebody or have seen them before, you don't really like give them a second look. People here are so nice and it's home to me, and I'm very comfortable with like talking to people, but I'm sure that if somebody came here as a tourist and they'd walk around, they'd be like, wow, everyone in Sydney walks so fast and is just always on a mission. That's definitely a thing. In LA, I feel like things are much slower. People are still on a mission and people are always really fast paced, but it's just different. Hospitality. The hospitality when I was over there was so much greater than here in Sydney. So when I was over in LA, I had a lot of people just like invite me places just for no reason at all. The first time I went for a college exchange, so I was living in the dorms, and I remember one of my roommates had a friend over from San Francisco for 3 days over the weekend, and I made really good friends with her. So she was like, hey, why don't you come up to San Fran? There's a wedding going on and you can come visit and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, why not? I've only known you for 3 days, but that sounds fun. I mean, I took a risk. I could have died. She let me like stay at her house, like she took me around. It was really fun. And just the fact that I could turn up to somebody's wedding that I wasn't invited to and they were totally okay with it, I just think that's so weird. You wouldn't crash somebody's party. But over there, apparently it was fine. So yeah. So I actually went to 2 weddings while being in America. Both times were on the fly. The second time was when I was visiting an old friend up in Northern California, and he was like, hey, why don't you come to my cousin's wedding? We're all Mexican, everyone's invited, it's totally fine. And I was like, why not? I've never been to a Mexican wedding before, which by the way are so much fun. You feel so accommodated for over there, and people are so willing to just be like, hey, stay at our place, no worries. Whereas here it's like, if you want to stay at my place, you have to tell me when, you have to tell me how many people are coming. Like, it's totally fine if you stay, but like you have to tell me in advance. It's just different. So I'm really thankful to all the people who housed me while I was in America, whether I was waiting for a plane the next day, going to a different city. Part of it was also because I was there to travel and I was there to be spontaneous. So maybe that was kind of like the vibe that I was when I was overseas, and then coming back to Sydney, I'm like, oh, I live here, there's no spontaneity. So that could be part of it. Next point. The next point is very common and everyone says this, but it's tipping. The only thing I want to say about tipping is I get it in the sense that because Americans are paid so little in that kind of job, that's why they need you to tip. But in my opinion, it's like, why don't you just pay them a better wage? I don't like the idea that a waitress is putting their whole like worth and their whole being into a customer's hands. You're counting on that for your living, and that would stress me out every day. Yeah, that sucks. Here in Australia, we're just paid well, so even if you don't get a tip, it's not that big of a deal, but the tip is kind of like, oh, you did an extraordinary job, or yes, you were great at your service today, so I'm going to tip you. And yes, we do tip here, it's not like we don't. Whereas in America, it's kind of like, oh, I have to tip, so you have to consider the price of the food and also the price of the tax and also the price of the tip, which is a lot. I actually found that, I just want to say, you shouldn't put your worth in how much people are tipping you, because you are a great person no matter how much they tip you. This one's a funny one. Next, the boys. Parties. So different. I mean, not that different, but so different. I don't understand why Americans always have to play drinking games. I definitely know that this is becoming a more popular thing nowadays in Australia, but can't you just drink? But yeah, nowadays, like, I don't go to that many parties, I gotta be honest, but now we play games like board games and stuff. I am such a grandma, oh my goodness. Classes also are so different. So I went to a college, it was a smaller college, it wasn't like an Ivy League or anything, and college in America is like high school. So you sit in a classroom and they teach you like you're in high school, which is just so weird. I remember one time I had this assignment and it was supposed to be an essay, right? And then 3 weeks later, the teacher was like, oh, I'm just gonna change it to a multiple choice exam. And I was like, okay, that's great, that's fine. And then like 2 weeks later, he was like, oh, I'm gonna change the multiple choice exam to be like a take-home exam. So you guys can take it home and then bring it back next week. And I was like, what? Can you just like change the form of the exam whenever you want? That's so strange. Like in Australia, we get given our unit guides and that's it. You don't change it. If you want to make changes, you have to make it the semester after, and it has to be like approved by a certain number of people and things like that. So it's just so much more flexible, which is kind of good because it's easier, but then also not that good because it's easier. But I guess, to be honest, I was doing an easy subject because I was there for the experience and not the studying. Cafes are so different, like not in the sense of food or service or the look of them, but in the sense that you can literally sit there all day and be on your laptop or journaling or talking to a friend or I don't know, whatever you want. You can do whatever you want and sit there, and it's like a hangout spot. But here in Sydney, cafes are more like you go there for social purposes. You can spend like 2 or 3 or 4 hours there. You can spend as long as you want, but there's kind of an unspoken rule where you have to leave to make room for more guests. And I'm sure no one would say that you can't be there, but it's just, no one does it. Also, you're allowed to have bonfires on the beach, which is unheard of in New South Wales. Well, not unheard of. It is very unlikely that you're allowed to have a bonfire on the beach. So it was one of my favorite things to do while I was in LA, to go to the beach, have a bonfire, put some marshmallows on the fire, have s'mores, which are actually not that nice but really fun to make. And also, I put everything on the bonfire. I put Doritos, Cheetos, someone put a mandarin on the fire once. Guys, another thing that is so different from here in Sydney, where I live, is just the horizon. I think in Sydney, we have a lot of hills. All the houses and the buildings and stuff, they're built to the topography of the land. There's a lot of hills and stuff, so you don't really see big mountains in the horizon. But in LA, the ground was like so flat and you could see miles up ahead. You could see the hills and the mountains. Anyway, I actually felt at home in both places. So here in Sydney, Sydney has always been my home. Thank you guys for joining me for another little chill chat with me and my frizzy hair because I haven't washed it in a while. And I hope you guys have a lovely day. I'll see you next time.